Anytime.
Well, I'm going to be talking to you about suicide, specifically suicide caused by jumping off of tall buildings or bridges. The main claim is that suicide barriers such as nets or tall fences along the bridges fail to deter people from committing later acts of suicide by jumping. My secondary claims are that people, instead of jumping off of that single bridge with the barrier, they will simply substitute it for another way to jump off a building or bridge. My secondary claim, or my secondary claim is that 90% of people committing suicide aren't in a rational state of thinking, so they're clearly not going to be deterred by rational means. My third secondary claim is that suicide deterrents fail to have an effect on people when they are going to be jumping more than once. For my first secondary claim, suicide substitution, records at the office of the Chief Coroner of Ontario, there was a barrier installed on one of the main bridges in Toronto, the Bloor Street Viaduct. It's the second most popular bridge to commit suicide by jumping off of. The first one being the Golden Gate Bridge, which has claimed over 1,300 lives. But anyways, the suicide substitution. Records at the Chief Coroner's office have stated that before the installation of the bridge barrier, there were 56.4 suicides a year. After the installation of the bridge barrier, there were 56.6 suicides per year. So there's no effect on the overall rate of suicides per year. Secondly, the rate of jumping from nearby bridges before the barrier was installed was 8.7 suicides per year. But after the installation of the barrier, it rose 63% to a total of 14.2 suicides per year. Buildings in the Toronto area also saw an increase of suicides per year from 83.5 pre-installation to 42.7 post-installation. My second claim is that 90% of people who jump are in a rational mindset. An article on mentalhealth.net has stated that 60% of suicides are committed by people with mood disorders such as bipolar, major depression, dysthymia, which is low-grade depression, cyclothymia, which is milder bipolar, and schizoaffective problems. The other 30% of people are afflicted with psychotic disorders such as eating disorders, sleep disorders, or war veterans that are afflicted with PTSD, or just average people afflicted with PTSD. Alcohol is also involved in 30% of suicides, and people under the effects of alcohol have impaired judgment and aren't going to be deterred by rational means such as a barrier that's stopping them. They'll simply just go somewhere else. My third claim is that suicide deterrents fail to have an effect on people that do it more than once, because clearly if they're going to do it more than once, it fails the first time. A Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry said that 71% of people that jump more than once are afflicted with mood or anxiety disorders or abuse or drug abuse disorders. So people aren't thinking rationally and they're not going to be deterred by the barriers. Mental Health has also stated that people who have attempted suicide are 38 times more likely to commit suicide again or attempt it. In conclusion, I'd like to say that suicide barriers fail to deter people from committing suicide by jumping elsewhere because people can just go elsewhere. They're not thinking clearly, so they're not going to be deterred by rational means. And third, people that have tried to commit suicide once are 38 more times more likely to jump elsewhere. Thank you.
All right, Matthew, you identified the subject. The proposition is also labeled, although I think the phrasing is a little bit awkward, as are the secondary claims, because they should be declarative sentences, and they don't always sound like clear declarative sentences, so you'd want to work a little bit on that. I need a little bit more about the controversy on this. I'm not sure what dispute there is on this. For instance, if there was an argument about whether or not the additional expense should be borne by counties or cities that have bridges or buildings and corporations that own the buildings being responsible for putting in some kind of barrier, then I could see why it is we're talking about this. Otherwise, it's very difficult to show that something has no effect. I did like the set of statistics that you had on the Toronto bridges, for instance, or I guess it was the Ontario Police, although it sounds like the bridges in Toronto, concerning the number of people who jumped off the bridge one year and then after the installation of the barriers jumped off the bridge. I thought that was as close as you could get to something that effectively shows that there's a limitation there, or that there's going to be a continued amount of suicides regardless of whatever action that we take. Later on, when you're talking about the mental health issues, clearly people who are suicidal are mentally disturbed. So again, I'm not sure that there's any controversy on that. And then the question becomes, in their mental states, would any barrier deter them or move them? And I think that you need a little bit more development on that. The one thing that I thought, for instance, that was really problematic for your argument is the notion that people are intoxicated when they engage in these behaviors. It seems to me like the barrier would be one thing that would really work for intoxicated people. If they are intoxicated, they have a harder time navigating those sorts of things, and so maybe it does hesitate and create some problem. I'm not sure that your argument answers that point. I thought you had excellent statistics on the argument and a couple of good quotes. The examples that you have are mostly hypothetical. And there's some good factual data. I don't know how widespread this issue is. It appears that it's primarily focused in Toronto because that's where our examples are. But I think that you need to show us, for instance, that this is going on in other places too. So I thought your generalizations were pretty solid given the evidence that you had. Your presentation's a little bit low key, and you have some more time. So I think that you could probably, like I said, expand your generalization and maybe talk about some of that other stuff that needs to be brought up to show that it's a real controversy there. All right, thank you.